Or?
Yes. So I wanted to talk about this formal employment and formal creation of jobs. The fact is that whereas the numbers look very nice that the economy has grown, I think when you look at the survey a bit more in detail and read it against other reports, one thing that is very clear, that our economy is being public sector driven. The growth is public sector driven. You look at the employment, the growth in wage in private sector is actually falling. In public sector, it's growing up. It's going up. And largely in public sector, the Teacher Service Commission is leading. And you know the multiply effect of teachers. But that is something to be worried, because government does not necessarily exist to create employment. It creates employment, yes, and it's important, especially for critical services, healthcare, security, education, and the like. But sustainability in terms of incomes of the country is only driven by the private sector. And as we are saying, it's only within the private sector context, formal one, that you are able to collect taxes. So what you're seeing in this report is that private sector wages are actually going down, real income. And I think there was an article, must have been on Monday this week, I think in the Business Daily, that real wages are actually going down, but they're going down fastest in the private sector. And remember the point I made earlier, our indicator of whether incomes are improving or not is income tax, because that tells you both corporate tax and pay as you earn, you know, personal income tax. And therefore, that is something to be concerned about. So that then of these 70,000 jobs, majority of them are actually in public sector. They are not necessarily, it's not necessarily new opportunities that we have created. Two, the government has spent quite a bit of money in the last couple of years investing in infrastructure. There's been quite a lot of cash transfers, some of which we can talk a bit about later on, because that we also see some of those numbers are going down, yet they are critical. And therefore, you realize that then you are not making a contribution that is going to be sustainable in the long run, because public sector cannot grow the economy in and of itself. But there are instances when public sector investment becomes very critical, particularly during a recession. Because during a recession, you need to inject money into the economy, and therefore it makes sense to have labor-intensive kind of programs. You remember 2008, 2009, when we had, I think, one of the biggest recessions in this country, and there was need to actually inject money in economy. That's the concern I wanted to raise as we have this conversation, that this formalization of jobs and the growth, and then there's also another point I think that also tells us that there is something to be concerned, because when you look at credit, access to credit to private sector is also declining. You know, access to how much credit was advanced to private sector, which then tells you private sector thrives. For private sector to grow the economy and to participate in the economy, it thrives on credit. So access to credit, both from microfinances and from banks, but when you compare that to the credit advanced to governments, you know, particularly for treasury bonds and, you know, basically government papers, it is not at par. You know, it's until recently when now the CBK started reducing the interest rate that now, so that's the point I wanted to make.
And then what happens, because the government also is the single largest consumer of domestic credit in the economy, and ideally commercial debt credit to the government was 32.4%, with the private households, trade, construction, and the real estate manufacturing taking 18.5%, 9%, 8.1%, and 7.9%.
Precisely. Let me just expound that a bit. What that means, it means that when I go to a bank, Daktari here is the government. I am the private sector corporation, and Guyo is a small trader, is a micro and small enterprise. He is offering 16% assured, because government will do that. I am offering, maybe I'm saying I can offer you about 18-20%. I also have a corporation. I have a, you know, I have an official address. Therefore, you can come for me, almost assured. He is the informal trader we are talking about. Leo amefungua, the full day hajauza. Kesho ameamua, I don't need to sell books anymore, let me sell umbrellas because now it's rain season. Maybe that's what will move. How does and then you are the creditor.
Yeah.
You know, you're the bank. Who do you give money?
The government.
You say this one is risky. I might even never be able to get back. This one is almost assured, but let me give government. That's exactly what it means. But government does not produce a good and a service that is going to be taxable. Yes, it is providing a service for a teacher. It is providing a service for, for a police officer, for a security officer, and the like. Yeah. But you see, those are not things that you can directly be able to get an income out of in terms of tax. When you now bring in even questions around corruption and how much wastage, now you cross-reference with Office of the Auditor General and the EACC reports, then you start now seeing where the challenge is. So it cannot be celebrated, that yes, credit is growing, but when credit is growing only to government, it's said that be wary when credit is growing only to government because of the factors I have explained. But more importantly, when banks are making huge profits, but they cannot necessarily account for what economic contribution they have made, but they are making because the credit is going to government and it's assured payback, as it were. Okay.
And Dr. Abudo, then give us a synopsis of how the mainstay of the economy, the agriculture sector, has performed.
I think before I go to the to your question very directly, I would wish to respond to what Bwana has mentioned, that the survey report is lacking the element of disaggregation. I think it will be really asking for too much at this level. Talking of disaggregation, because this is information that is compiled through the administrative information. In the process of doing your work, you generate data, and so we get this information from government ministry, departments, and agencies. We also get this information from the establishment, and when you look at the establishment, they are not broken down by the regions. And an establishment could be existing in Nyeri, but providing services beyond the borders. And so how to give proportions to what belongs to Murang'a, what belongs to Nyandarua becomes an issue. And so then we give this information at the national level. If you are to get what would go below that, either it is through a census process or and when I talk of census process, it's not just a population census. I'm talking of census of any other items within the area of interest, or we get it through survey. That's when it will be disaggregated. But as it is here, that is really not possible. And in fact, that there are only few areas where we are talking of births and deaths, which information is disaggregated at that level. We are all aware that disaggregated information is more useful than when it is global. But for this particular case and this report, really, this is how it is.
Okay.
So then I go to
agriculture.
The issue of agriculture. And agriculture, really, we are aware that agriculture is the mainstay of our economy, a fact that we can't run away from. Though it has also been going down a bit because other areas, in terms of its contribution to the GDP, but because the other areas are also coming up. But as it is today, it is accounting for 22.5% of our economy. And so anything affecting it would mean that we can do either very well or poorly. And so in the last year that we are reporting, there is a mixed reaction. You mentioned about production of maize going down. Yes, it went down from 47.6 million bags to 44.7 million bags. That is true, and that is a decline of about 6%.
6.1%.
Yes, 6.1%. And so then, there's a reason to it. Last year again, we had the maximum amount of rainfall as compared to the other years from 2020 to now, the 5-year period, it was the highest. And by that you would have expected us to do better. Now we did not do so well because it was rain that was not supporting maize production. It was too much at the time when it came during the long rains, and we saw the destruction that came with it. Then you go to fresh horticultural produce. Again, we realized that it went deeper by about 14.1%, and so those are two key areas within, because this horticultural produce are majorly meant for export, and so when the production goes down, then you also expect to attract very little from our export, and then that interferes with our trade deficit. So those are two key areas that really went down. But when you talk of wheat, you talk of tea, you talk of coffee, they grew. Not to a great extent, but rice had a greater increase of 23.2%, something that, but then it matters to what extent. To what extent is it covering up for those that went down? In other words, what is it? Its weight when you go to the basket of agriculture. So it grew, yes, but then that did not cushion us so much. So we take note that at the end of the day, then agricultural sector grew by 4.4%. So that growth, you see, it is now below the GDP growth of 4.7. So you see now the main driver of our economy slightly went down. And it is for the factors, for a main factor that was beyond the control of a human being.
How much of it, Edgar, will come to you on the fertilizer fiasco, and also for the case of horticulture? Is it a case of production down here, or a case of the changing trade landscape in the world, where tariffs have literally squeezed out the European markets? That way was the main destination largely for our horticulture. But Guyo, looking at the affordable housing, which was one of the projects that the government and the president touted, but the survey showed the jobs created were not in tandem with what the president and the Kenya Kwanza administration leaders have held. For example, it says that the construction sector declined by 0.7% in 2024 compared to 3.3% in 2023. Therefore, says that attributes this, that by the end of April it had created, according to the government that is just looking for the specific where it cites the jobs that have been created, says the companies employed 223,400 persons, down from 226,000 in 2023, as the government employed 200 people more in the construction sector to reach 9,900, according to the economic survey. It seems that the political tone does not align with the economic reality, as the report shows.
I think we are not meeting the revenue targets, so that we will have more money. And of course, we are also servicing very high debts, obviously. So we need to expand the tax bracket so that we will bring in more revenue for government to be able to inject more money into the economy. With regards to the housing, for me, I think how affordable is those housing? Who affords it? How affordable is it? Because if I give you a good example of a private sector, Great Wall China, the estate which is in Mlolongo, the house is 1 or 2 square feet. And obviously, they purchase the land. They will also provide utilities like road, electricity, and do all the connectivity. But they're giving, they're selling the houses for less than 4 million, 3.3. when it comes to the affordable housing by the government, the counties are providing lands for free. And also the government gives incentives to the investors in terms of zero rating some of these materials. But again, they are as costly or even more than what the private sector provides. Mm-hmm. You see the dichotomy there. For me, it has to be affordable because Kenyans are like saying, yes, we are paying tax. Why can't the government construct these houses? Because it's the Kenyan people who actually, it's their money. And the government could just give it at a very affordable prices or even give it out for free. So that is also something which the government needs to look into it. If you are, for example, buying that particular house for you to be able to invest, how attractive is it to you so that you'll be able to recoup your investment by purchasing some of those affordable housings? So for me, the affordable housing in itself is quite expensive, even when compared to the houses constructed by the private sector investors.
Okay. Daktari, what does a decline in maize production by 6.1% means? That's more than, give or take, 2+ million production, decline in production in terms of bags of maize, and the fertilizer fiasco that we had during the reign of CS Mithika Linturi.
So first of all, I think I want to comment on that, and I'll also say something on housing. It's a bit of a surprise because for a country like Kenya, there's been every goal, every aspiration that production of a staple food like maize can no longer just depend on rain and weather conditions, and that's why there's been quite an investment, in the irrigation schemes, the Galana Kulalu and many other, different schemes. So for me, that's but it's also strange because the fertilizer and the former cabinet secretary was trying to explain his life yesterday in a sister station. And first of all, I'm not convinced that the intention initially, the intention initially was just to spur a production of maize. It seems to have been other interests, other economic interests, private especially, because that's where the scandals come in. Of fertilizers at one point, part of it was donated, part of it, there was also the concern about, that African Sense had, expounded on that some of the fertilizer was actually not fertilizer at all. It was, I don't even know what to call it, fake. It has no even semblance of fertilizer. My point is that I don't think in 2024 and 2025, to be precise, we can continue to excuse, because when you look at the countries where sometimes we have bought maize and beans and all this from Uganda, Malawi, Zambia, and the other countries, the climatic conditions are almost the same, and they have not had a shortage of food as it were. So yes, I understand. Yes, there was a rain fluctuation and the like, but also the factors of production are also as high. I think there are other factors, the factors of production, and there are people. I think there have been reports, even including on your station, of people who are moving away from production of maize, and they are moving to something else. Some are deciding perhaps, to go into real estate and the like, and they are no longer, because they are saying, first of all, when you produce, the possibility of your maize being bought at the right price, at the point when it needs to be bought, has not been fixed. The NCPB and all the challenges that are around that. That could actually explain, part of this decline. That is not just we planted, then the rains messed it up, but also that there are fewer farmers, who are willing to do this kind of production. But let me come to housing, if you may. It's okay. Yes. First of all, I think when you look at the whole construction industry, and I want us to go beyond just the affordable housing, because affordable housing, I still don't think it was necessary, particularly in rural areas, because in rural areas, about 80%, according again to the KNBS statistics, of the people there live in their own homes. Think about where you come from in your villages. People live, they may have other things they need, like connectivity to clean water, electricity, but they live in their own homes. In the cities, it is about 20%. But the problem in the cities is not an ownership problem. It's an affordability problem. So that in this city of Nairobi, I think the last report I saw, it's a couple million surplus already of residential space. So it's not an issue of that there is no construction, that has been done, is that people cannot afford. And I allowed the effort right now, through the Kenya Mortgage Refinancing Company, as it were. But secondly, is to say that there is actually no private activity commensurate happening within the housing sector, because even the consumption of cement, which is a key driver of construction. So assuming it was all mechanized. Yeah. So you can say that, employment went down because the construction is mechanized. That is possible. But cement has declined.
By 7.2%.
Yes. Which means cement is a key input, in the construction industry. It actually means that sector in itself has actually contracted. There are no more houses being built, and therefore the problem perhaps could not be, and as Guya has said, there's no way you can build with subsidy from government and still charge the same cost as private sector.
So what's then the net effect here? Dr. is still on you before I come to Dr. Obudho. Yeah. Because that then takes the 7.2% decline to 8.537 million tons of cement in 2024. Also talks about the increase in prices of construction materials, which rose by 2.83% in general, as compared to 2.3% in 2023, among the contributors to a drop in construction sector jobs. Yes, the jobs have been affected. Certainly the report, it differs with what the president has been saying. Even on Labor Day, the president held that the program had created 250,000 jobs spanning architecture, engineering, urban planning, carpentry, plumbing, and electoral works. But ideally, then that's different. The second is the consumption. Is this, in effect, also affecting the other parties in the private sector, other than the government?
I think it is, first of all, a sector like this that is should be a priority sector for a country that is the population is expanding. And I don't know what is the estimate right now, but I suspect our population is around 56, 57 million, give and take, thereabout. For a sector that is as central as this, you would expect a very high uptake, which then simply means that, you see, the construction industry is an industry that is dependent on other factors. It is dependent on your ability to afford a mortgage and therefore to buy, and for the developer to be able to make their money. It's dependent on inputs. Now, everything around the inputs is going up, which simply means that sector in itself is no longer competitive as it should be. The costs of doing business in that sector is quite high. Secondly, it also means that the uptake of this product that is coming from construction is not as good, and it's basically for what I have just explained. On one hand, you have people who own their own homes. They live in their own homes. So they're not looking for another house, as it were. So they're not looking for a house to purchase. On the other hand, you have people who would like to have better place to live, but they cannot afford, which then becomes a mortgage problem, a credit problem, as opposed to, a lack of availability. As I've said, that then has a ripple effect even on your taxation, because then it means that then the sector like this that you are trying to, and I think it's, let's just be honest, the numbers within this report and the numbers, indicated elsewhere do not match, in terms of, because I would dare ask, which jobs?
Okay.
Yet you can see already there is actually a contraction in terms of growth.
And also commercial banks cutting lending to construction sector by from 602 billion in 2023 to 528 billion.
You remember the example I gave?
Yeah.
The cost of credit is a key input to private sector growth. Two, the regulatory environment, taxation especially, is a key driver to whether people spend their money or they hold back and wait.
Yeah. Dr. Obudho.
Yes. Now, let me just first